Hello and welcome to State of the Project Meros, and this is the January 2021 edition. Yes, people, we made it. We got through 2020 somehow, and we're on the other side, 2021. So we're actually recording this in 2020, so it should go out on the first Friday of 2021, just in time for the alien invasion or whatever else 2021 has in store. So this is State of the Project. The idea behind this podcast, or now video cast, I guess, it's that we follow the development of the Meros project. So we've been following it for over 2 years now. Every single month, myself and my esteemed friend here, Mr. Kayaba, have been discussing the GitHub in depth, but we've also discussed some of the philosophies behind the project and some of the things it hopes to achieve, why it hopes to achieve them, and some of the other technologies that it uses. So, without any further ado, because we have got a lot to get through in this particular episode, I want to get started by introducing my good friend Kayaba. Kayaba, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I'm always excited to be on this podcast. I think you're a great host, and I think we talk about a lot of good things. So, yeah, always
Well,
excited to be here.
one thing that does spring to mind, and it will spring to the viewers' minds, is that you're using a different camera. So it seems like you've been dragged into the 21st century with your new 4K Ultra HD
Mm.
super smooth camera. So it's excellent. We get to see your eyes now and that magnificent beard. So yeah, congratulations on being the second most handsome person involved in the project. So excellent, good job. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
on a serious note, we've been speaking for some time about January being the launch month for the mainnet of Meros. Um, we've just got on the back of the most recent developer testnet, which was slated to be the last one. I'm not sure if that's still possible. Is that still the issue? If that's still the plan, but we'll come to the developers testnet in a minute. Do you still think that Meros will be ready to launch in January? And or are you sticking to your original philosophy of having the project launch when it's ready? And do the two things combine?
So, yeah, I never abandoned that philosophy. One of the things that I do when I'm a developer is I really do consider morality. And I'm not going to say, I saw this one take. If you write poor code, like just slow code, it's immoral because therefore it uses more power and that contributes to global warming. No, obviously I'm not going to take that take. Nothing that extreme. But I do consider morality just because we're working with financial systems here. If I created a financial system that was hacked, that represents two people losing money. And those people, some of them are going to be investors who can take a loss, but some of them are going to be people who would struggle if they lost all that money at once. So maintaining responsibility and keeping all of this in mind is really important to me as a person. And along those angles, sorry, I'm just trying to keep my train of thought going. The answer was always Meros is going to launch when it's ready.
Yeah.
And the reason that I discussed launching in January because I believed it was going to be ready in January. That said, this final test net, it's going to take a month. It may actually only take 3 weeks, depending on the exact timing around it. Because if we use a 5 minute block time instead of a 10 minute block time, which is the shortest I would want to use for this final test net, um, the last time based event will happen 2 weeks in.
Right.
So because of that, just 3 weeks would be enough to really test things out. Sorry if my camera's wobbling a bit. My dog's pressing against it. So, um,
This next testnet, will it be as planned, a public testnet? Will it be the first time that the testnet will have binaries and Joe blogs, average people like me can just go and download the binaries and give it a go?
right. So to this last test net, which is going to take a few weeks, that's I just want to say that is the best way to gauge when Meros will launch at this time. Because the fact that we haven't launched it yet and I'm not announcing it yet means it's not going to be ready by January 7th or whenever this comes out. Before then, probably, or around then. And that means that 3 weeks from then is going to be the end of January. So that means that last day of January really is like the soonest we would be discussing. So no, I do think we're looking at a February launch at this time. In this last testnet, yes, it is going to be an open testnet. Anyone can download binaries and run it. Because part of testing Meros isn't just testing the protocol, but it's actually testing distribution and how people interact with it in the UI and all of that. So it is going to be a public testnet. And I have been considering running one more in between, but I do think we're just going to do the final testnet when the time comes.
What platforms will the final testnet be available on?
The plan is to support Windows, Mac, and Linux, all three of them.
So all the big ones. Okay, so I guess we should discuss the hottest topic of the last month. I know you guys have been really, really, really busy. I say you guys now because it's not just you. There's quite a few other people now really testing Meros out in the developers testnet, which is great to see. So if you could summarize, and then what we'll do afterwards, we'll go through some of the key issues. But if you could summarize, how did the testnet go? Were you satisfied with how it went? And yeah, just give us a summary of how your thoughts are on the most recent developers testnet and final developers testnet.
Yeah, so we definitely got a lot of participants, and I'm really thankful to all of them. Something that while I work on Meros is I always consider anyone who, just gives support to other people, runs a node. I really do consider them as personally helping me, because even though they're interested in Meros and they have a reason to be there, I always considered Meros kind of as I don't want to say child, that sounds too cheesy, but it's kind of true. I've always considered it something that I've put all this time and effort into, and something I want to nurture. So when anyone helps out Meros, even if they're doing it because they care about the project or themselves, they may not like me particularly. I'm not trying to make any assumptions, but I do think I'm a friendly person. I do legitimately consider them as personally helping me. So I've always been immensely thankful to everyone who's participated in our test nets.
How did one go? Did it last as long as you wanted to? Did you manage to find any new problems out? Did you find things worked better than you had expected? Like what was the overall feeling once it had finished?
Right. So the testnet, I wanted it to last for a week, and I believe it lasted 4.5 days. And that kind of sounds like, oh no, nodes can only run for 4.5 days before shutting down. No, that's not what happened. So we actually did find a couple of bugs that we hadn't previously known about. And they're actually stuff I'm really happy to have found, because that's the point of these testnets. The point of these testnets is to find bugs that we didn't know about and verify them. It's not, oh, everything works perfectly, let's just launch. It's, no, things are a work in progress. Let's find out what parts need to have more work and time spent on them. So one of them was a node error, which was a crash. And it actually happened to quite a few people a few times, and it's not something I'm going to hide or lie about. Transparency has always been my policy. I legitimately believe it's the best policy, just because all of this is pretty much public record. You can go on our Discord and ask the people who participated about it. You can check out our issue tracker on GitHub. It's all very well documented. And
this issue, I've got it. I was going to ask it later, but I guess it really does fit in with talking about the last developers testnet. So, are we talking about issue number 264?
What was the title of that issue?
Oh dear, you caught me slipping now.
I'll try to pull it up myself.
Yeah, you're going to have to, because if I do, then I'm going to end up sharing my screen, blocking you out.
No. All right, issue 264. No, this is actually the issue that ended the testnet. So that crash didn't end the testnet. What ended up, quote unquote, ending the testnet is it was a voluntary decision. It's not like the net was so unstable we couldn't continue with it.
Right.
But Merit, the token that people mine and is then used to vote on transactions, which confirms them, and it's really what makes Meros unique and special. It's the merit caching mechanism which we've developed. So Merit, this token that's used to vote and to verify transactions, it actually became negative at one point, the amount of online merit. Because online merit is determined by who's been active in recent moments. So as we're running a developer testnet, some people spin up nodes, participate, but then they'll log off. They'll be running on a laptop and they'll head out. They'll have their node crash due to the crash that I was trying to discuss earlier. They'll, whatever reason, their server, they only paid for a few days just because they also have other code they want to run. Whatever reason, people go offline, and that's part of the testnet, is verifying that when people go offline, it's properly handled. Mm-hmm. In this case, it was not properly handled. In this case, it was considered negative, which is something that should never happen, and is actually pretty dangerous to the network as a whole, not going to lie. So yeah, that was not good.
So those were the two main, were they the two main problems were nodes crashing, which we haven't really discussed properly, and then nodes not being able to disconnect from the network properly without causing the network some sort of harm.
No. So we have merit, and then we have unlocked merit, and it's the unlocked merit that was going negative and causing these problems. But it wasn't actually related to nodes going offline. Like, it was, because it was the unlocked variable, and that's related to that. But the actual problem was with a different part of the system. Merit lasts, on the mainnet, it's going to last 1 year.
Yep.
Which means that if you mine a block of merit, you can participate as a verifier for an Oh, sorry, I just have allergies acting up. It's cedar season, if I recall correctly. Some drink. If you mine a block of merit on the Meros network, you will get to be able to participate as a verifier for an entire year.
Yep.
And when that year ends, we're going to say either you haven't contributed in an entire year, you haven't been mining and adding to the network security. There's that one hand. Or, you probably went offline forever ago. Let's not consider your merit anymore. So because of that, we have a process known as dead merit, where it dies, basically. That's the term for it. And it's no longer considered. So there's two systems there. There's dead merit, and then there's unlocked merit, where there's merit that just died, and then there's merit where if you haven't been online long enough, it's not dead, but it isn't considered, because if it was considered, then nothing would get verified, because enough people might go offline where we can no longer hit that threshold. So as part of this, right, so it's those two systems working together. As merit was dying, it was updating the wrong counter, and because of that, it was updating the unlocked merit counter in a way that it went negative, which was unfortunate, to say the least. It's really just the overlap of the two systems. And we did actually publish a fix for that, but the thing was, publishing the fix changed how rewards were distributed. And because rewards changed their distribution, the existing blockchain, which was built off the existing rewards and had transactions based on those existing distributions, because people were sending around Meros, testing things out, they were invalidated just because those rewards no longer existed. And the block said, oh yeah, these rewards exist, and these transactions spending them exist, and suddenly they didn't. They were invalid. And because of that, the blocks were also invalidated. And it actually got rid of over half the chain, because the problem had existed earlier on in the testnet, and we just didn't notice till later. So because it invalidated over half the existing blockchain, we could have continued with the fix and just lost all that data, but I just said it really wasn't worth it, and might as well just end the network there.
Yeah. Going back to something you just said about dead merit, something just popped into my head, because I know you're really keen to test all of the functionality within Meros. Something like dead merit, which lasts a year, how would you test for something like that? Do you have to run a testnet for a year, or is it possible that after the Meros being live for a year, if there is an issue with this dead merit system, that it may only show up after a year? Is that possible?
No. So we've talked before about how we have Python code in Meros, and we actually have a complete re-implementation of the protocol in Python. It's not a node, don't get me wrong. Like, it doesn't do all the validation necessary to connect to the network directly. But it implements all of the protocol messages and can properly communicate with an existing Meros node. And we use this to verify everything. We'll actually start a node up, and then we'll just run the Python code against it, test a bunch of transactions, blockchains, network messages, really ensure not only protocol compliance, but proper handling of the data it's receiving. And it's actually a large portion of our code base. And one of the things I'm especially proud of is the fact that it basically re-implements everything. One of the technologies we use is called BLS, and there's a few libraries out there for it. And the Python code uses this one library known as Milagro, which I believe we've talked about
Yep,
before,
we did. Yep.
where NIM, the main actual Meros node, uses this one library called Blast, BLST, but it's pronounced Blast. So yeah, that's something I'm proud of, just the fact that the Python code handles so much of this independently. So if a library that Meros uses breaks, and we wouldn't necessarily detect it because, the node itself is running and still talking with other nodes, Python will be able to catch it.
Mm-hmm.
So as part of this, sorry, I'm just trying to regain my train.
So
Right, we do have tests for dead merit, and there's
yeah,
two ways which we're able to test this. One, the fact that it uses its own version of the testnet, and the testnet has a special block time. Like, it doesn't actually say dead merit
right.
happens after 1 year. I think it happens after just a few hundred blocks instead. I forget the exact number. But the other thing that we can do with the Python test is we lie. We actually lie a lot. Difficulty is a function of time. So we do actually produce valid blocks, but we also say that the blockchain started at 0, like at the start of time.
Okay.
And then it's no longer the start of time. It technically, according to computers, it's this thing. The start of time is technically 1970. It's a thing. It's called Unix timestamps. But right, so we say that the blockchain started in 1970, and then just blocks happened every 20 minutes past that. So because of that, as far as the network knows, like, yeah, we have valid blocks. The difficulty is just 1, because it's always supposed to get easier and easier because we're always taking longer than we should. And because it's 1, any single hash we'll throw at it will verify. So because of that, we can create a blockchain of any size we want within just a few minutes.
Right. Okay.
So even if it did take a year, yes, we would be able to generate those thousands of blocks.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I've got a next question, which before we get
Sure.
into GitHub, the next question I wanted to ask you was about something that we had discussed in passing a few days ago, as that the atomic swaps work that you've been doing for Meros. Um, how is that coming along? Now, just before we went on air, I had described it as ASMR, which I was swiftly corrected by you. So, how are the atomic swaps coming along? What are you finding to be the most difficult part? And are you still confident that they will be ready in time for launch?
Uh, just 1 second. Sorry, I
Oh,
have really bad allergies.
bless you.
Um, Thank you. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Um, right. So ASMR was the Meros Atomic Swap project, in which we were actually the first to implement this new atomic swap protocol, developed by some people for Monero. And our tool actually ended up supporting Meros and then Nano and then Monero. Because the protocol itself, it wasn't exclusive to Monero. It just overcame the hurdles that Monero faced.
Yep.
And these hurdles were the same hurdles that something like Meros or Nano had when it came to atomic swap. So this protocol for Monero really opened the floodgates for all of us. And despite being a Meros developer and writing the tool and hosting it under Meros, one of the things I really believe in is collaboration. Who would I be if I took a Monero protocol and then wrote a Meros only tool? I mean, that's what happens in tech. I'm not trying to say people shouldn't take tech and improve it. I'm saying that we should always give back. So in my case, what I did was we added Monero support, and the developer I worked on it with, who goes by Plasma Power, is a former Nano developer, and he's still a big supporter of Nano. And even though Meros mainly competes with Nano, I do actually like Nano. I think a lot could be done better. There's a reason Meros exists. I do have my preference there. But I do like Nano, and I admire it, especially for its role in when it came out and how it faced certain challenges. But again, yes, I have my criticisms of it. But anyways, the point was is that we did want to create something for the ecosystem. We wanted to not only say thank you to Monero by supporting them, but we also wanted to demonstrate we're willing to collaborate with Nano. And also yes, I got my friend Plasma Power to agree by saying yes, we will add nano support. Because again, while I do like it, he did actually want to add nano support himself. So,
so are
but
we on course for having atomic swaps enabled within Meros at launch?
so right, so ASMR we talked about it a while ago, and it was actually finished when we talked about it because it was only meant to be a proof of concept. It wasn't meant to be used by any decentralized exchanges or services. Just because while it was technically possible, I mean, yeah, sure, you could write so code that wraps it, or you can write Rust that directly hooks into it. It had a lot of shortcomings. It was full featured. Like it did implement the protocol securely. It used SegWit, which is a requirement on Bitcoin due to something called transaction mutability. Um, and it did implement all the refund paths. So if someone tried to back out, if there was an error, or someone tried to scam someone, yeah, it would successfully handle that. At the same time, though, if your computer went offline or if it suddenly rebooted, it would just lose its data. And they would not be able to recover from that whenever it went back online or your computer turned back on. And because of that, it wasn't production ready in any sense of the term.
Yeah.
Just because, no, if you use this at some point, something unexpected is going to happen and it's not going to be able to recover and it's just going to die. Because it can recover if the blockchain transactions like are just bad. Like if someone doesn't end up funding the system or they say, nope, I want to exit out of the deal, but it doesn't handle things outside of the system, such as, power and internet loss.
Yeah.
That said, ASMR wasn't meant to do that. It was truly meant to be a proof of concept to verify it can happen and to kind of say, yeah, here's proof it works, here's it working, so on, so on. Can be used, really shouldn't be.
Okay.
That said, we showed it to the people who actually wrote up the protocol. The protocol author is a guy known as Hashed, H4SH3D. Yeah, and we actually showed it to him, and he said, yeah, we were going to create a Monero CCS proposal for it. The Monero CCS being their crowdfunding system, and it's something I deeply admire and would love to get going its own version for Moneros, which is probably something to talk about another day. And he and his associates, crew, whatever you want to, there's a group of people over there. He asked both Plasma Power and I, if we wanted to participate in the actual CCS proposal, because they wanted to crowdfund a solution that actually could be used in a decentralized exchange or could be used by a service, really a full-featured, complete setup. And I did agree to that, so I actually have been contributing a few hours a week to a project known as Farcaster, which is writing not only specs to make this understandable, integratable, and so on, but also Rust code to actually implement atomic swaps, which can be mapped to any of these cryptocurrencies and used by any organization or project.
Awesome.
So that is what I've been spending just a few hours a week on, because it is something not only do I personally believe in, but it's also something that benefits Meros, because while it's explicitly for Monero, it's being designed with multiple coins in mind. It's not being locked down to Monero or only supporting Monero. We won't even have to fork it. We can simply submit a Meros module to it. And it's something I'm very excited to be part of.
Okay, so now I want to really delve into the GitHub issues that we've got. There's some that are closed and some that are open. I picked out five, but we've already covered one of them, so we've got four more to cover. And then we'll discuss one last topic, and then we'll wrap up. So we're
Sure.
about halfway. We're at the halfway stage. So okay, so the first one I wanted to speak to you about was issue number 273. Blocks which define a new merit holder should have an increased difficulty check. The reason why I wanted to pick this one out was it jumped out at me because it's a protocol issue, which I always feel is something that's very, very, very important. Um, I did want to ask you, I asked you offline, but I'll ask you again now. Why is this particular proposal marked or not marked as a critical proposal? Because something like this, I would assume, would be a critical issue.
Right. So arguably any protocol issue is critical just because sorry. Just because it has to be done before mainnet. Because the second mainnet happens, we can't just like flippantly change the protocol. Because not only would we have to hard fork, and get the deployment out, but there's also going to be a lot more scrutiny in any changes we make because now there's a live network and it's running and there's actual money in the system. So that said, critical generally refers to things that need to be done immediately. Protocol changes, yes, they have to be done before mainnet, but they don't necessarily have to be done immediately. There's definitely some time that can pass. So something critical would be something that is, I think, I'm trying to think of something that I recently marked critical. I'm not sure I did, but that testnet crash may have been something I marked critical,
Okay.
just because I was actively breaking nodes on a daily basis. And
Yeah.
while it was easy enough to reboot them and continue on, it was critical just because it was something that had to be handled immediately. There are also some bugs which have been open for weeks or months, which are probably marked critical. It's not a guarantee that I get to them immediately, but it does represent core errors that really should be fixed and just bugs and glitches that are important. It's not something we can put to the side or say, oh yeah, it's just like a issue with a GUI. It's not just rendering
Yeah.
correctly, but it's fine internally. But no, it does say that the internals have some sort of error that do need to be resolved rather quickly or should be
Okay.
prioritized.
So this one in particular, blocks which define a new merit holder should have an increased difficulty check. Number 273. At the time of us recording this, it's still open. I'm assuming it's going to be handled pretty quickly. But could you explain a little bit about what this actually means and how you fix it?
Sure. So it actually is implemented. There should be a commit attached to the issue, which says, yeah, implement this issue. It's open because I have yet to add the test for it, and I'm someone who believes in thoroughly testing Meros. It goes back to that responsibility thing I brought up earlier. Um, so basically, we have a penalty system if a verifier is malicious. If you create two transactions which spend the same amount of Meros twice in a row, not the same amount, but the same instance of Meros, the same output. Uh, Obviously, verifiers will vote on it, and as they vote, one of the transactions will win and one will lose. That said, a verifier can lie. They can say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to vote for both of these. See what happens. Try to get two instances of once in the system. Let's just mess some stuff up." And that is obviously invalid and harmful to the network. So we call these people malicious merit holders. They have merit and they're being assholes about it. So we have a built-in penalty system that says if the network detects this, they can just immediately slash them. They can remove their merit. They can say, "Yeah, nope, you had your chance. Get out of here." Um, but because of that, there is this game theory incentive. We have one merit per merit holder. So in order to like dance around merit removals, where if it does happen, what you can do is instead of having one key with 10 merit, you have 10 keys with 10 merit, which technically isn't something we can stop, unfortunately. And it does harm the network in its own right, just because by adding thousands, like we would get to tens of thousands of merit holders if everyone did that. That really would slow down the system a bit. Well, we have BLS, which does massively help out with this, just because we can basically combine every single vote into one. We can produce an aggregate signature that handles every single merit holder. We still have to index it in the database and keep track of all of it, and it would add slowdown. So on its own, it is not to mention it just increases the amount of bandwidth being used and network usage. It's not helpful, but it is something that some merit holders may want to do just because it protects them from the system a bit more. So because merit is issued by mining, one of the things we can do is we can say if you're registering a new miner, which means, yeah, exactly that. If you're trying to enter a new miner into the system, that you have to do even more work. So on the one hand, this actually makes it harder to enter the system, which is not something I'm happy with. I've always been a staunch advocate and believer in decentralization. So because of that, anything which increases the barrier to entry is not something I'm happy with. That said, I do think it's best for game theory. Now, if you did want to have 5 keys with one merit each instead of one key with 5 merit, you're going to have to actually do 10% more mining in order to do it, which is enough to disincentivize miners from following that. or at least hopefully will be, because that is a significant number when you're mining multiple blocks at once. But for any legitimate miners, it only happens on their first block. And for someone who only has it on their first block, it shouldn't be enough of a deterrent where it actually is a meaningful barrier to entry. So it really was something that we were trying to find balance about, is that, do we want to be a barrier to entry? Do we just want to disincentivize? And I do think 10% nicely hits that number of making sure merit holders have incentivization to use one key for all their merit, but also, not prevent new holders from existing.
The next platter. Oh, for those of you who are not who are listening or watching and who haven't necessarily watched before, I put all the links to all of the issues in the description. So if you want to go into GitHub, you can go and see it for yourself and watch the drama unfold. Me and Kaiba actually discussed some years ago now, and I had said that people who aren't developers should still have a GitHub account. I still stand by that, although I was ridiculed roundly by Kayaba for suggesting such a thing. Because those of us who aren't that technical, if you're not that technical and you've gotten this far into this particular podcast, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, jump into GitHub, get into it and read about, because there are lots of things that you can see happening, and it is very interesting, even if you can't participate as much as these other geniuses. Okay, so the next GitHub issue that I wanted to discuss is number 272, right? Link is in the description, as I said. And the description is untested aspects of the protocol. Now, I like this one particularly because it's like a compilation of Kayaba's greatest hits of things that need to be done. So, could you describe to us what this issue is about? And also, this seems like a new way of you doing things. Is this something that you've recently learned how to do? And if so, where did you learn it from? And are you finding it more helpful?
So this issue is actually just a list of things that I want to add tests for. Because as I said again, we have a lot of tests. We have tests in NIM to actually test individual pieces of the node. We have Python tests, which spin up an actual node and do a lot of work involving them. And despite having not only comprehensive test suites, like just frameworks to run tests with, we also have a lot of tests. But that said, there are some more I would like to add. And previously, when I noted something that I noticed wasn't tested and I felt should be, I just wrote a note to myself, just kept a little index of it. And I decided it would be best not only for my personal organization, just because my system wasn't too efficient, but also in case anyone else wants to start picking up tests, to make a public record of it. So I did create a GitHub issue, and I think it has 19 issues right now, which are just things that we really should add tests for. Because I'm almost certainly sure that almost all of them work. There's a reason they're not getting their own dedicated issue, but it's always good to make sure that they work. And in case in the future, if we change something which breaks something, these just have extra safeties. They'll say, oh yeah, turns out we changed this and we had this side effect we didn't realize, but now this test failed, so go fix it.
Do you feel like writing out these tests or coming into Meros and taking control of one of these tests that's been highlighted is a good first issue for developers to come and get involved in, or do you think it's a bit too critical?
Yeah, no, a lot of them are extremely simple tasks because, there's a reason they haven't had tests yet. If I create an issue, I'll create a matching test for it. If there's a new feature, I'll create a matching test for it. So a lot of it is extremely basic stuff. Like when we create a data transaction, the signature is checked. And we've done tests before, and, we make sure datas are signed. But it's really just basic stuff. So it would definitely be a great way for people to start getting into Meros if they wanted to help out with development, which is something I would really appreciate personally.
Well, there are a lot of developers around in the Discord now, so
Mhm.
we can now
Yep.
start to point the finger and say, yeah, you guys need to pull your finger out
Hmm.
and start chipping in. Thank you
Yeah.
very much in advance. Okay, so the next issue, we're getting through these pretty quick. This was a good one because this one had some discussion actually in Discord. I know you're quite excited about this one. Well, excited. I'm not sure if that's the right term. Uh, Issue number 265, JSON RPC 2.0 over TCP is horrible. That's literally how you've how you've described that one
Yep.
in the GitHub. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, and also could you explain why that one has um, garnered, I won't say so much, but why that one has garnered conversation within the Meros Discord?
Right. So with the recent testnet, a few people started writing actually writing tools around Meros. One user, they wrote just a basic tool to generate transactions and send them out. Another user, uh, sorry, just gathering my thoughts here. So yeah, sorry. So one user, they wrote tool to send transactions, as I said. Uh, and the same user, Verin, they also wrote a tool to keep track of the amount of merit holders online at the time. So it kind of just said, there's this merit holder number one, number two, number three. They have this much merit. This is how it's distributed. It actually created a pie chart, which I liked.
Would that sorry to cut you off? Would that be something that would be quite useful on an Explorer? Would that be
Oh yeah,
something?
no, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
And as part of that, they had to deal with the RPC. They had to ask the node, "Hey, what's going on? What's the status of X? What's the status of Y? What's the status of Z?" And right now, our RPC, it goes over TCP, which is how most of network communication is routed. Don't get me wrong, and it's not optimal because it's extremely simple to like. Don't get me wrong, it's built into every modern, like anything that handles sockets can handle TCP. Don't get me wrong. But to actually read and write JSON over it, you have to. There's not a lot of support for what we did because we basically just wrote the objects directly, and because of that, you have to read and write. You have to like determine the start and the end of the object, which is extremely like it's easy to do. Don't get me wrong; it's not something complicated. But you do basically have to count the amount of start object instances and end object. So, like with JSON, the left curly bracket, it defines an object, and the right curly bracket closes an object. So you just read in a character, you see it's the start curly object, you're like, oh yeah, got a new message. And then when you reach the right curly bracket, you're like, okay, yep, message is over. So you just have to count them because objects can also be inside of each other. So you have to +1 for each you see and then -1 for each end object marker. It's a thing. It's not hard to do, but it's annoying. It doesn't easily integrate with existing software. And I did the design decision at a time because there are advantages to it, not only because of its simplicity, but due to something called pipelining, where JSON RPC, the protocol we use for the actual RPC, it doesn't actually define how you're supposed to send it around. You can do TCP, you can do HTTP, you can really do whatever. But you can actually respond to messages out of order. So if I request block A, block B, block C, you can actually respond with block B, block C, block A. And that sounds complicated and a bit harder to handle. And yes, it is harder to properly use, don't get me wrong. But it actually has a lot of advantages because if you do a large request where you request one very large object and it takes 5 seconds, and then you also request a couple transactions, which would take half a second, you don't have to wait 5 seconds for all your data. You just have to wait the half a second and you can get the transactions. And then 5 seconds later, you'll get the block. We don't actually have any thankfully, we don't have anything that takes nearly that long. We don't have any routes that even take half a second. It would really be bad design if we did. But I did like technically supporting that. And with HTTP, which is the expected way to handle this, they say that if you request ABC, you must respond with ABC. It's part of HTTP itself. So despite JSON RPC supporting this out of order responses, which definitely allows responding when you're ready and just being very efficient about it, HTTP itself kind of removes that functionality, which is something I'm not happy with. But we really just need to move to HTTP just because it's much easier to integrate with. And even if the RPC is technically superior as is, it's really about using the RPC, and when people go to use it, they're going to want to use HTTP. So it's just
Um,
a poor design decision I made a while ago that I have to correct now, and it's come up because community members are, finally starting to use the RPC.
so in the discussion on the actual GitHub issue, I'm reading your actual comments here, and it does say something about status. Does say status has got a bounty open for this. Are you thinking about a solution by using status's JSON RPC library? Would that be
Right. So we um we already use a lot of code from status. Notably, their async runtime in programming. There's this way that I don't want to get too in depth, but there's this thing called async. It's just refers to how you handle like network requests in the order you execute code in. And we actually use their async runtime, which means we actually use a good. It's a very significant thing in async runtime. It's not like something minor, and we already used the one from status, so we're actually already using a lot of their code, and they're major contributors to the NIM ecosystem, and they're also in cryptocurrency, and they're a project I personally respect the development of. So they already have their own HTTP JSON RPC solution, and it's not something I want to use just because I'm already happy with the JSON RPC system we have.
okay?
That said, if we need to add HTTP to it, we need to have an HTTP server, and there's not really an HTTP server like just available. We have to get a live. We could build one. Don't get me wrong, but it would be a bad idea for a few reasons to build one, just because ensuring accuracy with the HTTP protocol is one problem, but beyond that, we also have to, then we're responsible for maintaining it. So I did want to grab an existing one. And there's not really an existing one out there that we can just use, unfortunately.
Okay.
But Status does have an HTTP server in their JSON RPC code. The thing is that we just have to move to it entirely. So instead of just wrapping their HTTP server, we would also have to use their JSON RPC code, which is the part I'm not too excited for, but it is likely what we're going to end up doing.
Right. Okay. The next one, I've already really enjoyed reading your comments on this one.
Yeah, I try to thoroughly document it and just cover, why this isn't just a simple task, and while it's important, here are the options in front of us and how we should move forward.
Yeah, and that's why I will say it again. Even if you're not a developer, it's really interesting to read these things. Okay, so this one is another one. I think you was a kind of a bit of a role with these really succinct descriptions. So this one's ED 25519 usage isn't stable. That's issue number 266. You do then go on to explain, because you don't just leave it there. You do then go on to explain in your first comment that when you say stable, you're not referring to the consistency when running. You're not
Right.
worried or discussing arbitrary, invalid ED25519 signatures being considered valid one moment and not the next. But the
Yeah.
implementation differences with ED25519 libraries, which can cause splits between implementations. Now,
hmm
what does that actually mean for Meros, and where would you find these splits, and how would it affect you whilst developing, or even the end users perhaps?
Right. So this was actually recently published. Like, it's not something that was like in secrecy. It's just something that gained garnered attention recently. And when you're dealing with ED2551 signatures, it's possible, if you want to be an ass, to craft certain signatures. And there's a reason I say certain signatures. They're not normal signatures. They are special. And they are valid signatures. Like, yeah, no, they are valid signatures, but they're not normal signatures. They have special properties that wouldn't naturally occur if you just want to create a signature. And when you create these signatures, some libraries will accept them and some will reject them. Because some libraries will normalize them and accept them, some libraries won't normalize them, but acknowledge they're still valid, and then some libraries will be like, what the hell is this? This is not a normal signature. Get out of here. And these libraries will always say X signature is valid or X signature is invalid. It's not, oh yeah, that's valid. 5 minutes later, oh wait, no, why would I validate that? That's not valid. No, they are consistent with their behavior of it, or at least
Yeah.
any proper library. Um, and the reason that libraries can disagree is just because there's just a lack of definition about how to handle these signatures.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like these libraries are bad, these libraries are good. It's just there's a lack of definition, so it's kind of undefined how to handle them. And since it's undefined, different libraries have different behavior. So this is actually something that's faced Zcash. They actually wrote up a proposal on how to remove this. You
Who?
can
Sorry, who did you say?
Zcash.
The privacy coin. You
Yes.
mean? Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
So they actually wrote up a proposal that said, all ED25519 signatures must follow these additional rules, and because of that, anyone who writes code involving them will have consistent results. Because the main concern isn't, the Meros node talking to another Meros node. No, it's if I have a Meros node in NIM, which is what the current one is written in, and let's say we write another one in Rust in the future. So we already have a lot of Rust code in our project, not in Meros itself, but in things like ASMR, which is written in Rust.
Yeah.
And if we do end up writing a Rust node, we're going to use a different ED25519 library. We'll probably use one called Dalek. I think it's Dalek, but I'm actually not sure.
Dalek.
Yeah, we'll probably use a library that's known as that. It's this great library. We actually use it in ASMR. But the library we currently use in NIM and the library we use in Rust, they might disagree on certain signatures. So that means if we have both nodes going around, then an asshole could say, oh yeah, I'm going to craft this special signature, and the NIM nodes will accept it, but the Rust ones won't. And because of that, the two will separate. Yes. It's possible to actually split them apart. And yes, they would be an asshole for doing it, but it's also something they can do and they can easily do. So even if they were to be an asshole, Meros isn't built oh yeah, I'm going to trust people to be nice. No, it's a trustless and decentralized project, which means we need to be able to handle this properly. So yeah, it's just about adding extra rules to how we handle these signatures to ensure consistency. And if we do ever write a node in Rust or C++, or if we took our Python code and turned it into a node, that we can properly handle it.
Okay, that's kind of sums up all of the GitHub issues that there were. There are plenty more. There are quite a few. I'm assuming most of those got thrown up from the most recent dev testnet, as that seems to be the way things happen.
I think it got it definitely did get a few. I'm not sure if it counts as most of them though. I'd have to check. But
okay,
yeah, they got a lot of them.
Yeah, most of the new ones, let's say. Okay, so my last question was going to be, is the final public testnet up? But we've already covered that. So I guess the next question would be, I guess it would be a when public testnet, and what things do you want to have completed before you will consider that? Because what I've noticed over the past 2 years or 2.5 years is that it's better to ask you what needs to be done as opposed to when you predict it will be done. So at this point, what do you feel needs to be completed before you can move on to the final testnet, the one that we're all really looking forward to?
The public testnet will have everything done. The public testnet is going to be, it truly is going to be everything. It's going to be all the protocol, the core functionality. It's going to be critical bugs being fixed. It's going to be, we already have enough tests where I'm not expecting it to fail. It is effectively going to be what we would deploy at mainnet. We're just not trusting it with real money just yet. There are some projects that are like, oh yeah, we'll just open beta net. Yeah, put real money into it. Or, yes, it's labeled alpha or whatever. But yeah, it's fine to throw money in. No, I've always hated that. I found it extremely irresponsible. Either say your code's ready for money or don't put money in it.
Are you taking a subliminal shot at Ethereum 2.0 right now?
Or? No, I'm actually not. I think it was Tezos that did an AlphaNet. And then there's been this project which has been going around recently, which I personally very much dislike, called Solana. It's been garnering a lot of attention. And they're like, oh yeah, we said it's a beta. So if there are any faults and anyone loses money, it's not our fault. And it's like, then don't put money into it. It's part of corporate culture and people, rushing to get a product out there so they can earn money from it. And I understand why people do it. And I understand that some developers do need funding to continue the project going. And I'm not trying to decry the developers behind this, but I do think it's irresponsible to just absolve yourself of any responsibility from bugs by saying, "Oh yeah, we said it's a beta, now screw off." So no, this final testnet, it will effectively be a mainnet. I'm just explicitly saying don't put money into it, and I'm
Okay.
backing that up by actually deleting the database when the time comes.
Right. Okay.
Uh, but I will say it is possible the GUI won't be ready on week one, just to get it going earlier for earlier launch. Like when it comes to like the user experience and things that aren't actually related to the core node, maybe, but the core protocol, all of that will be there, and critical bugs will be fixed.
That's terrible news for me. So that means I'm gonna have to actually gonna
It
have to actually.
may. I just have to check the timing around it. It depends if we get some other
Oh
developers
gosh.
involved.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'll do my best, Cryptosi.
Please do. Please do. I don't want to be typing anything into command line. It's just not for me. Right. So, um, I guess my last question, which I always ask, um, I'm not going to ask this month because we've pretty much spent the whole time covering it. What I will ask you though is how are you feeling currently about Meros, and how are you adapting to the the I'm going to say boom in interest from loads of other parties? Because I've noticed that there's been much more activity in the GitHub. There's been so much more activity also in the Discord. So many new people joining, so many new faces. So how are you finding all those things? Are you still enjoying it? Are you thinking ahead about how to keep this community growing? And are you considering the philosophy and ethos behind the community, or are you just going to let it grow naturally and expand the way it just naturally does?
Yeah, so I've definitely been appreciating seeing everyone join. It's always great to grow the community. Meros is a project that I've spent almost the past 3 years of my life giving towards. So to see it kind of spring forward, it's really something I'm proud of and happy to see. Uh, Personally, for me, it's been interesting just because of the attention I've been personally getting. I'm not going to deny it. I have a bit of an ego. I've always kind of wanted to exploit Luna.
What, a bit
But
of
I
it?
will say that uh, it actually was kind of unfortunate. The other day, I kind of joined a group chat with some people that I knew, and it kind of immediately just went towards Meros, and I kind of just wanted to sit in and listen. That was kind of unfortunate, I have to say.
What they
Uh,
started talking about Meros, or you did?
yeah, no. As soon as I joined, they kind of just shifted the conversation over.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just something kind of personally disappointing for me. Because it's
I
happened a few times in that
do,
group
do
now.
yeah, do you worry now that you're going to become the Meros guy and people won't speak to you about anything else? Do you worry that that's going to be
Uh,
your
I
thing?
kind of already am, and I have plenty of friends. So I'm not trying to say, "Oh no, I'm so alone." No, I still have plenty of friends, and we don't just talk Meros because they either already know what I have to say, or like that's friendship isn't me just showing my projects. It was more referring to another group where I kind of just joined the voice channel occasionally. It is a public group; it's not like close knit friends, but it is something where I kind of just went to hang out. Um, so yeah, that was a bit unfortunate, but yeah. But I am really happy with how the community is growing, and I understand, my role in it. And when it comes to actually shaping it, I think my personality is going to attract certain people and kind of annoy other people. I'm very blunt and ideological,
Yes, you
and
are.
I think because of that, people who kind of agree with me are going to come in, and that's itself is going to shape the ethos of the community. And I think beyond that, one person asked, like, are we going to have a trading channel, not just for price discussion, but also to actually coordinate trades?
Was
So
that
when mainnet
Pedro?
launches, can
Was that Pedro that asked that?
actually, I think it was someone else who initially brought up an OTC channel.
Right. Okay.
Um, And I'm like, no, I don't plan for the server itself to host an OTC channel. Not like with one of the main reasons to speak liability. I'm not going to be the one hosting cryptocurrency exchanges, given how the SEC is really being overbearing on a lot of projects right now.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I really don't want the server just to become price discussion and trading and market. It's just only that. And of course, I do think a trading channel is important just to let the community foster and gain interest, because I do think that investors are going to be one of the way it grows, even though they may not be my favorite crowd of people.
Mm.
Uh, so by saying yes to a trading channel but saying no to an OTC channel, I think that is going to shape the community itself. because people who are only be there for an OTC channel are going to leave, and people who would require a trading channel are going to say, oh yeah, there's a trading channel here. So I think kind of just by deciding, or just by being myself in deciding what channels to have on the main Discord server, that's going to shape the community a lot.
Excellent. Okay, Kayaba, thank you once again so much for your time, your transparency, your honesty, and your new HD camera, because that's been the real win
Thank you.
this month. And before I let you go, is there anything else you wanted to speak about that I haven't perhaps asked you, or?
Um, no, not really. I mean, we discussed the testnet, like how the existing one went, the plans for the next one. Yeah, I'm just really excited, and I want to say thank you again for being such a great host. I always enjoy doing our podcast.
Yeah, so do I. So it's becoming the highlight of my month now, which is good. Not in a bad
Yeah.
way, actually in a good way. Right. So
Happy
yeah.
to hear it.
So thank you very much. Hopefully we'll get the next episode in February, which may be the big launch episode. It may be the one before the big launch episode, but that's when we're next scheduled to speak. So thank you very much. Congratulations if you made it to the end of the podcast, and please like and subscribe and all of that stuff. But also share this video, because now we're coming close to launch. Now it's really time to try to get the word out about this project so we can attract in more developers and more community members.
Oh,
Bless you,
sorry.
bless you,
Thank you.
and yeah,
The allergies are just telling me.
and not just investors, because otherwise it will only be investors, and
Yeah.
we know what that bunch are like. Nobody likes them. Okay, so Kayaba, thank you very much for donating this time again and for being a great guest over the past 2 years and 2 months. And I will see you in a month. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, Cryptosi. You've always been great.